cases, you have the Tywan Martin cases. Where's the community involvement when something does happen here in our community and not just separate, isolated incidents? You know, again, personally, I feel that you have the 60s and 70s where community engagement within the black community was at its height. Someone was stopped, arrested, frisked, whatever the case was. You had the community there at the precinct speaking to whomever needs to be spoken to see what was going on. Nowadays, and I'll be coming and going, and I'll see the police roll up on somebody, search and get out the car, and there's no community engagement anymore except for these major, big, isolated incidents. But I would like to see, and going back to the 60s and 70s, that black community involvement, for example, in saying that, listen, we're not going to tolerate this in our community so it doesn't escalate to a bigger scale. Yeah. Which is very important. What I would like to see, again, if someone was detained, if someone you know, was searched and stopped and frisked illegally, there was going to be a community reaction from the community leaders within the local neighborhood. So that element there now I see is gone. And to be honest, that's what our Dr. Kings did. That's what our Malcolm X's did. That's what our Black Panther, that's what Black Panther parties did.
This is important. This is an important point. You see, and this is what I was trying to get at earlier. First of all, I never want to get seduced by nostalgia, because I think when we become too seduced by how things were back in the days, then we fail to understand what tools are needed for this era to be able to address those issues. Now, that doesn't say that I don't think that we should. You know what I mean? No.
We need to know.
Yeah. I'm not saying we need to know what happened before. We need to know those stories. We need to know those fights. We need to know how they were fought and how they were won. But we need to not rest too much on that era as being the answer to how we address the contemporary issues. That's the first thing. And then the second thing is this, and I think this is the most powerful thing, and we talked about it earlier. We can never expect our communities to respond to those kind of issues when there is no longer a community. You see, when everybody was in the same hood, repping for the same things, with the same ideals, and I knew everybody, when something popped off, just by virtue of being in that space, I knew that everybody would converge.
That disconnect is not still going.
But yeah, exactly, the passion is still there. But when you have a community where when we don't connect to each other, we don't speak to each other, not because of ourselves, but because there are other folks in our communities.
Folks are dispersed.
There are folks that dispersed in wide away spaces. There were deliberate efforts to ensure that African American communities no longer existed as African American communities. One, you're going to find your way out when you get some money. Two, I'm going to buy you out, I'm going to give you $100,000 for your condo so you can go down south and buy a bigger house.
Or your brownstone.
Right, so when that has happened, when all that stuff happens, we are now in a generation that's reaped the benefits or the curses of those, the infrastructure no longer exists. Black people still care about black people, but they know black people around to care.
But one of the things that we have to, again, really be honest about, Chris, right? When we look at these national campaigns around these tragedies, particularly Jordan Davis and Tywan Martin, they fit a certain kind of profile that is attractive to some black folks, right? They are middle-class black boys, right? That and you know, it's the stuff that's not supposed to happen to them. We will, at this point in time, rarely see that kind of organizational push around when Pookie gets shot. And Pookie could have been just as much within his rights, right? But if Pookie had, you know, a bad engagement with the drug trade one day, if Pookie's reputation has been sullied in any way, even if he was in the right that night with George Zimmerman, we're not going to close ranks around him nationally, right? Jordan Davis, you know, and Tywan, they represent, these are the kids who are supposed to go forward, right? They're the good kids, right? We're upset because a good kid got shot down, right? If Pookie gets shot down, that's all part of the game.